Dad, do the plagues listed in the book of Exodus show up in real Egyptian history?
I think you're referring to the fact that I've shown you a few times, and I've shown my students online
Mm-hmm.
that there are people that show up and they criticize the Bible. They say, "Look, yeah, there are plagues in the book of Exodus," and they point out the fact correctly that those plagues were, let me say, atomic in their destruction. They weren't small things. They were massive destruction. All the cattle in Egypt died, for example. All the water turned to blood. So they say, no, where is that in real Egyptian history? Because when Egyptian historians write, there's nothing about those plagues. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good question. Those that raise that question, the one fellow, in fact, I think I showed you online, I won't use any names, obviously, but he said, look, he happens to know that Bible colleges and seminaries they refer to the plagues in Egypt in the book of Exodus, but they say we can't find those plagues in real Egyptian history. I beg to differ. Yeah, they're there. The problem is, in fact, let me describe to you something called the Ipuwer Papyrus. Ipuwer was an Egyptian official. He wrote over a period of about 7 years, and he was describing plagues that fell upon Egypt. When you look at the plagues that he describes, for example, the river, referring to the Nile, is blood. He refers to the water throughout Egypt. He said, our water, it's blood. He doesn't say it looks like blood. He says it's blood. He mentions the plagues, but he had no idea who Moses was. He didn't know Pharaoh. He was a lesser Egyptian official writing a papyrus, keeping a record of the plagues. He writes, for example, that the water is turned to blood. He writes, for example, I have quotes here from it, gates, columns, and walls are consumed by fire. All the trees are destroyed. Interesting, he says, Upper Egypt is destroyed, Lower Egypt is a waste. Now, wait a minute. Upper Egypt is destroyed, Lower Egypt is a waste. You're talking about areas the size of Texas and beyond, larger than Texas. Something atomic had to have occurred. The entirety of Upper and Lower Egypt is a wasteland. The water is blood. Gates, columns, and walls are on fire. There's hailstorms that burn up the trees. The animals are moaning. Plague is upon the people, and the firstborn of Egypt die. There's so many deaths, they can't keep up. Pure writes they can't keep up with burying them or disposing of the bodies, because the firstborn from Pharaoh right on down to the poor in the street, their firstborn die. Now that's probably several million people, and they're dead. The cattle is moaning. He said the cattle have sores on them. That's exact. Plagues of locusts come in, and these locusts are coming. They are hundreds of miles long. They ate up everything. When God hit Egypt with the plagues, Moses warned him, let my people go. Pharaoh said no. Ipuwer records the plagues that are mentioned in the book of Exodus. Now you say, well, why don't Egyptian historians write of it? Well, there's a fellow by the name of Sir Flinders Petrie. He was an archaeologist who was an atheist or an agnostic. And he was raised in a home, and he's bitter against his Christian parents. He became kind of a founder of modern Egyptian historiography, the study of Egyptian archaeology and history back in the 1800s. And he deliberately rewrote the history and rationalized it and X'd out the biblical data. Now, it's not just him. I mentioned, and this goes beyond our discussion here, but there's a chronology problem in dating things, especially in Egypt, before 1000 BC. Now, most Americans can't even conceive of getting the dates wrong. For example, World War II. Okay, 1941 for us. And in other countries, it began 1940, 1939. So the dating's easy for us. Not in the ancient world. In the ancient world, dating was an entirely different kind of a problem. They dated by the king or the pharaoh that was on the throne, and when he died, they'd start all over again. So then those records could get buried by calamity. And when a modern archaeologist comes along, he has the problem of trying to date it. They got the dating in Egypt wrong. It's off by a couple hundred years. Not in every case. So they're mixing and matching events and people that actually didn't see each other. Anybody that knows anything about ancient history knows, I could go to my library and pull out quotes on ancient chronology. That's the subject. Many people who are historians deliberately avoid writing in ancient history. Why? Because of the chronology problem. So yeah, there's the Apura Papyrus. A man who wrote about the plagues. We have the papyrus. It's on display, but it's misdated. Let me ask you. Somebody may be asking, well, if it's misdated, then it's misdated. So you have the book of Exodus testifying of plagues. You have the Apura Papyrus saying this is what happens in Egypt. How many of these catastrophes came upon Egypt? You see, Apura is describing what's in Exodus. And it was an atomic destruction, a series of blasts that God sent against that land. That's why there's a problem. Modernists who reject the scriptures then end up having a problem misdating. Now, when you get to 1000 BC and afterwards, dating starts to straighten itself out, but not beforehand. Now, I know that's a tough problem to reconcile, but the historians Thiele and Kerrville solved it. That's a whole subject in itself.